Talking today about yet another classic Disney animated film, Lady and the Tramp. So, in the past few videos where I've been talking about Disney animated films, I've done long, rambling introductions where I talked about all my history with Disney and my history with these films. And I'm going to try my best not to do that this time and just jump right into it. So, I've already talked about my history with Disney in previous videos, how I grew up watching almost exclusively Disney content as a child, partly because I had restrictive parents who wouldn't let me watch other stuff, and partly, it must be admitted, because I fell in love with it myself. So that's the general background to all of these reviews. Now, in the previous video, Bambi, I talked about the great impression that Bambi made on me as a child. And some of these Disney animated films did make huge impressions on me as a kid. But Lady and the Tramp, not so much. This is a much more, dare I say it, forgettable film. I mean, I enjoyed it as a kid. I saw it many times over as a kid, but I don't have any strong memories attached to it. I saw it during one of the theatrical re-releases in the 1980s. The Disney Channel, which I used to watch exclusively as a kid in the 1980s, would occasionally show clips from it. But the clips they would show were usually the same ones. The one with the beaver biting off the muzzle, or the whole scene with the beaver, and then some of the songs. Peggy Lee was the name of the singer, right? Doing "He's a Tramp, but I Adore Him," and maybe the "We Are Siamese" song got replayed a bit, although you couldn't do that nowadays, huh? We'll talk about that more in just a bit. I also had, as a kid, one of these toys from the 1980s. Actually, I was just looking it up on Google just now. It's from the 1970s, but I guess it was still being sold in the 1980s. The Fisher-Price movie viewer. Now, if you're not from the 70s or 80s, you won't remember this, but they were these yellow cassettes. You put them in this movie viewer, and you could crank them, and you could watch like these short 2-minute film clips. There was no sound. I had that toy, and one of the cassettes was Lady and the Tramp, the fight scene between Tramp and the other dogs when he rescues Lady. So this was the days before the internet. I used to play with that toy a lot, and I used to watch it in slow motion, kind of counting every blow. I can't say blow because it's a dog fight. Every bite that Tramp gave, every time a dog got turned over, and just watched it slowly and just analyzed the fight scene in detail. Like I said in previous videos, even though I grew up on Disney, I was still a boy, and boys are just fascinated by violence. So the fight scenes in any Disney animated movie are what I would pore over. And then once this got released on home video, we had a copy on home video, and I watched it I don't know how many times as a kid or adolescent after that. I was still watching these Disney animated movies up through middle school. I think around about high school, I finally lost interest in them. So, yeah, all of that is a long way of saying I saw this movie several times as a kid, as I did all the other Disney animated movies. It didn't make a huge impression on me. And rewatching it over the past few days, I've been rewatching these Disney animated movies with my kids, and this is one where there's a good copy on YouTube. So we've watched it a few times over the past week. And I've got to say, for what is one of the more forgettable Disney animated movies, I'm pleasantly surprised to see what high quality it is. I mean, the animation is really perfect on this movie. Now, I'm tempted to say something like the animation is gorgeous or the animation is a work of art or it's beautiful or something like that, but that would probably be overpraising it because it's not. It was never meant to be a work of art or gorgeous. It was meant to be a cartoon with a very identifiable Disney pop art cartoon style. But it is the quintessential representation of Disney Studio at the height of its powers. I mean, it's a perfect Disney animated film. And this was, when did this come out? 1952, I think. I'm going to have to double check that on Wikipedia. But it came out back when Disney was still pouring lots of money into the animated movies and when everything was hand inked before the bottom fell out of the Disney animated studios in 1959 after Sleeping Beauty. So after 1959, they did everything on the cheap, but this was still during the period where they were doing everything the old-fashioned, expensive way. And you can tell that the animation really holds up. A quick side note, in a previous video, in a couple of previous videos, I was referring to this as the golden age of Disney animation. Now, this is another thing I just Googled just now before filming this video. Turns out I've been using the terminology incorrectly. The golden age of Disney animation, as it's defined, I guess, out there, is from 1938 to 1942. And then after that, you have the war years, and then after that, you have the Silver Age. But I don't know, if I could quibble with the traditional, or I guess what's becoming the accepted categorization, the Silver Age apparently goes up from like all the way to 1969. And that doesn't seem right to me. I think you have to make a distinction between pre-1959 and post-1959 because the animation style changed drastically once they went to the Xerox technology in the 1960s. Anyways, point being, this is although it's in the Silver Age of Disney animation, this is still using the old style. And it struck me watching this that this style of animation really has never been improved on. You compare it to anything Disney did throughout the 60s, 70s, 80s, and it's much better animation quality than anything they did during those decades. Maybe by the 90s, I guess, okay, it was equivalent, but it not better. And then I guess now 2D animation is apparently dead, right? Everything's being done by computers or in the well, actually, not being done by computers isn't so much the issue, but it's being done in that 3D computer style, right? 2D animation is supposedly dead now. But yeah, I mean, go look at clips of Lady and the Tramp. I think that is Disney at the height of its powers that has never been improved on, even with all these decades of technology. And I think the pacing of the movie and the plotting of the movie is probably dated by today's standards. But certainly in the 1980s, when I was still watching it, it was very much in line with the pacing and plotting of a normal 1980s cartoon. So it held up for several decades. Probably doesn't. Some of those slower songs in the middle of it wouldn't catch a kid's attention span today, but held up for several decades. The big problem with the movie, or it's not even really a problem, it's just the thing that makes it less memorable, is that the plot is so utterly forgettable. Now, again, I guess you can't really call that a problem. But, you know, it certainly has no traumatic scenes like in Bambi that's going to resonate with a kid's brain and imprint themselves on him. And, you know, certainly you wouldn't have a movie like this released today, right? Everything would be about a hero's journey or saving the world or some sort of big existential evil threat. Here is just a story about a couple dogs, and there are some plot climaxes along the way, but it's just a completely forgettable story. But within that completely forgettable story, the plot beats and the character beats, I think, work very well. So, you know, there's that climax with the rat in the baby's room. And it's kind of as Disney films go, you know, it's kind of a forgettable climax. It's no Prince Philip fighting the dragon at the end of Sleeping Beauty or anything like that. But they do... The Disney animators or the Disney studio does their best to make this as exciting as it can be. So this rat is a big rat. It looks quite evil. When Tramp goes up to fight the rat, there's an extended scene where he's chasing the rat all around the room, and there's dramatic music, and it goes on for a bit. And same when Trusty and Scott save Tramp from the pound. There's I don't know, I hate to give this too much credit because it is one of those annoying Disney fake outs where you think Trusty is dead because the movie is portraying him as being dead. And then he shows up in the next scene with just a cast on. According to Joe the Disney guy, whose videos I'm using again as some source of information on this, the original plan was for him to die, but then Walt Disney was convinced that actually the story didn't really need it, so they have this fake out death, which I think a lot of the Disney films had these kind of fake out deaths, right? The Jungle Book had that fake out death with Baloo. Robin Hood had that fake out death with Robin Hood at the end. So it probably worked fine with its original audience when it first came out in 1952. The problem is it became such a cliche within Disney movies that if you grow up watching the Disney canon, you start to lose patience with these fake out deaths after a while. But yeah, it's a minor point in the movie and it passes really quickly. The characters are really well done. Tramp, the character the Tramp, has aged very well. I mean, I guess he's, you know, he was like the streetwise wise guy in the 1950s. And some of the, I don't know, some of his slang or mannerisms is maybe a little bit stuck in the 1950s or 40s, but for the most part, it's a character that still pops, like he would be completely lively nowadays, and is a really good character. Lady is largely forgettable, but then she's meant to be largely forgettable. Jock and Trusty are good. Yeah, it's just a solid film that's very forgettable just because it has a very mundane plot. But if you look at what the film is trying to accomplish, I think it does a good job of what it's trying to accomplish. Now, I suppose you have to talk about the Siamese cats in this one, or the "We Are Siamese" song, because that maybe I probably spend too much time online or on YouTube, but I see this mentioned all the time as like, one of those 10 worst racist Disney moments. Um, and I have a rather non controversial opinion on this, or what I think is a rather non interesting opinion. Um, Meaning that I think it is a bit racist. And it's unfortunate that that's in the film. At the same time, I don't think the film should be censored or excluded or anything like that. It's rather common stereotype, especially during the 1950s. I'm content to let it go. And I think that's an opinion that probably most people have, even though if you spend too much time online, the loudest voices tend to be the extremists on either side. And what I mean by the extremists is, on one hand, the censors on the left who would say, like, okay, we need to take this movie down. It should not be available to children. We need to cut this scene out. Nobody watch this anymore. This movie is in the bad movie box. On the other hand, you have the reactionaries on the right who would say there's absolutely nothing wrong with this. It's not racist at all. It's just everyone's being too sensitive nowadays. I don't want to spend too much time on this because this is really low-hanging fruit as far as movie criticism goes. But I think most people have the opinion it's unfortunate, definitely kind of racist. But just leave the movie alone as a classic movie, and we just have to acknowledge that this kind of stuff is in classic movies. Although, rewatching the movie and kind of with that maybe modern attitude in mind, thinking about the modern culture wars, I noticed how the whole movie is stereotypes. So there's a stereotypical Irish policeman in this movie. There's the different families that Tramp visits. He puts on like a Scottish accent or an Irish accent for one of them, a German accent for another one. There's of course that huge Italian stereotype when during the spaghetti scene, the Italian chefs. The animals. There's a British bulldog who's doing a British stereotype. And then there's a Russian dog who's doing a Russian stereotype. And then there's a Chihuahua who's doing a Mexican stereotype. Did I say Mexican already? Sorry. The British bulldog, Russian wolfhound, I think it is, Mexican Chihuahua. And what other ones are there? I mean, it's just throughout the whole movie. And I'm largely going to sidestep this discussion, but we could get into a discussion about whether the fact that this movie stereotypes equally or broadly makes it more forgivable or less forgivable, or if Irish or Italian stereotypes are somehow less offensive than Asian and Mexican stereotypes because of power dynamics or something like that. The discussion to be had, I'm going to largely sidestep that. Other than to say, I think one of my favorite little throwaway jokes in the movie is when Lady is at the pound, the Russian dog is explaining to her about the dog catchers, and he refers to them as Cossacks. And then later in the movie, when Tramp is coming to visit Lady, and Lady is still mad at him, she retains that terminology of calling the dog catchers Cossacks. She says, "And I don't care if the Cossacks do get you." And it's just one of those things that's said so quickly. As a kid, I completely missed it. That this was a joke referring to like the Russian stereotype because of the terminology that she picked up from the Russian dog in The Pound. That lady continues to refer to the dog catchers as Cossacks. I thought that was clever. Or maybe a stereotype I shouldn't be laughing at. I don't know. Yeah, what else to say about this movie? I was on Wikipedia, and it was interesting. Wikipedia, apparently the reviews that, you go to Wikipedia and you can read what the reviews were at the time it got released, and apparently a lot of reviewers were saying that the animation was subpar compared to other Disney movies. I'm thinking, I didn't think so. I mean, I was just praising the animation at the beginning of this review. Now, it's not like as stylized as the animation in Bambi, or Sleeping Beauty for that matter, although Sleeping Beauty came afterwards. But it does not look like it was animation done on the cheap. It looks like it was animation that was in the what I think is the golden age of the Disney animated period. I think I'm just going to stop this review here. I mean, maybe I could think of other things to say, but I don't need to do an hour-long video every time just because I fell into the habit of rambling and doing an hour-long video in the past. It's good here. I've said most of what I want to say.